Welcome to America Uncanceled. I'm Mercedes Schlapp. While feminism started as women's empowerment movement, well, over the years, it has slowly transformed into a leftist propaganda machine that adopted lie after lie until women were left worse off than they were before. How have women been betrayed by the left? And what is the path forward for women in America? And quite frankly, how can the Republican Party win back the woman voter? Answering that question today is renowned GOP strategist and one of my friends and the author of the newly released book, The Real War on Women, Jennifer Kerns. Jennifer, thanks for joining me.
Hey, great to be with you, Mercy.
So I'm so excited when I got the copy of the book, which you all should get because it's just been released. But let me ask you a question. Why did you write the book?
Started hearing about this war on women that Republicans were supposedly perpetrating. The first time I heard about this was back in 2013, and I was actually conducting a women's focus group in the battleground state of Colorado, and that was really the first time I heard about it. And I thought, wonder if there's any truth to this.
Right.
And it really set off on sort of a 7-year journey to start researching this issue and find out which party was really damaging women the most with their policies. And it turned out, after I did all the research, it turns out that it's really the Democrat Party. And the reason I wrote the book was really, this is my love letter to my suburban mom friends who were telling me by the dozens that they were really being bullied in the car drop-off line by the liberal mean girl moms, sipping their Yeti tumblers and, trashing Donald Trump, Orange Man bad, all of those things we know that liberal women do. And these women were very concerned about their kids being indoctrinated. And now we see, as you cover on your show daily, we see that really turned out to be true.
Right. I think one of the phenomenons I've seen, and we'll get into this book, but one of the phenomenons I did see during the Governor Glenn Youngkin's race here in Virginia, just being here in Virginia, was the rise of the suburban mom. The fact is that they just wanted to be quiet, raise their kids, really just be involved in the kids' schools, but really let the teachers do their jobs. But then all of a sudden, it became, the National School Board Association calling these parents domestic terrorists. It became the fact that they were learning about what their kids were studying, and then all of a sudden they're like, wait a second, I can't be silent. What do you think the role of the suburban mom has been ever since we've seen these educators in particular and these school administrators take on or basically adopt the woke agenda?
Well, the moms of today's, what moms have had to become, really puts those 9-12 hockey moms to shame, right? Because now moms and dads too, quite frankly, have realized that their kids haven't been going to school. They've been going to indoctrination camps.
Right.
And we talked about this actually pretty early on out in California. They say politics that happen in California kind of permeate through the rest of the United States 5 to 10 years later. And we warned about this in 2008. I was the official spokeswoman of Prop 8. That was the landmark case, ballot initiative, marriage traditionally versus gay marriage, that went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. And I remember during that whole fight, the gay lobby said, hey, all we want to do is be able to get married. That's all we want. Well, during that campaign, Mercedes, we actually found out that the school boards and some of the education lobbies were talking about introducing gay education, gay sex education, and sorry to say this word on family programming, but they wanted to teach kindergartners about things like anal sex. And I remember when the campaign manager came to me and said, you have to go out and talk about this to the press. I said, I don't even want to say this word, on television. And I remember at the time the Hollywood Reporter called us crazy, me in particular. I'm sure you're no stranger to that, being a conservative woman. ABC News said, this must be a lie. Perez Hilton, who was a big blogger at the time, also said, you guys are crazy. This is not happening. And now we see that sort of curriculum is indeed being introduced across the United States.
Oh, absolutely. Well, let me ask you, as a GOP strategist, we saw in these midterm elections, you're talking about 72% of the women, they voted Democrat. They vote it's a high turnout for women in these elections. This was obviously in the age group of that 18 to 29, where many of these women sadly haven't discovered that when you go with the Democrats, it's higher taxes and it's less freedoms in your life. But where do you think the GOP has gone wrong? How can they work to bring women back to the fold and really say, look, we're the party that's we're not waging a war against you. The ones who are waging the war against you are the Democrats.
That's right. Well, in my book, I talk about 14 different policy areas, and I made sure to really research these statistics. I've been a researcher for presidential debates, been fact-checked to the moon and back, and I wanted to really present sort of a handbook that had the proof to back up our 14 policy positions where Democrats are hurting American women. And one of the disappointing things, I agree with you, is the fact that 2/3 of the women who voted in the midterm elections said they voted the way they did because of the abortion topic.
Right.
And I think we as the GOP just have to start really looking at educating women more about the other 14 issues that probably impact their life more than their need or their need to have a choice to have an abortion. And those are 14 everyday things that I think most Americans and most women can understand.
Well, let's go through a couple of these 14 areas. You talk about the government lockdowns in the hands of the Democrats. They robbed women of 2 million jobs. We're now seeing obviously the numbers on inflation, 6.7%. That has gone up. How can women really survive in this economy?
Well, it's so interesting to me, Mercedes, somewhere along the line, the Democrat Party and the feminists all kind of joined up, and they're really working as one. And I think the feminists have really become enablers to the Democrat Party today, which we know is the farthest left that it's ever been. And on issues like the government lockdown, they really violated what was once the crown jewel of the feminist movement, which was putting women into the workforce. Well, during the COVID lockdowns, at the hands of really about a half dozen liberal Democrat governors and mayors, from Gavin Newsom to Andrew Cuomo to Governor Gretchen Whitmer to Eric Garcetti in Los Angeles, you really had just a handful of Democrats putting millions of women out of work. And there were two key places where it happened, Mercedes. One was in September of 2020, when guess what? Kids had to go back to school. There was no school was in session in places like Los Angeles and New York. So what did moms have to do? They had to make that decision to stay home with the kids. It happened again in January of 2021, the same month that Joe Biden was actually inaugurated. And remember, Joe Biden said, first 100 days in office, I'm going to keep the schools closed to keep everybody safe. So moms and dads once again looked at each other and said, hey, which one of us is staying home with the kids? And another million women left the workforce. If you look at the numbers, it didn't just hurt women, it hurt minority women predominantly. The year leading up to the lockdowns, there were nearly 1,800 new minority women-owned businesses opening per day across the country. Latina-owned businesses were up 87%. Minority businesses overall were up about 40%, and all of those disappeared during the lockdowns, and no one's really ever had to take the blame.
Let's talk about the far left, especially how you've had, the Squad and many in the Democrat Party really embrace socialism, and you talk about this in your book, how socialism is destructive. It's killed over 100 million people worldwide since its inception. So, Jennifer, what else have we learned in terms of what the Squad and those women represent? Because you see AOC, she's always either crying or, she's moping about something on the left's agenda and always saying how the GOP is the one hurting women. Well, what's our response to the Squad?
Well, look, I say in the book that the Squad is really the most damaging group that has come forth in the last 50 years in American politics. And look at the speed at which they've been able to change policy. AOC herself has put forth the Green New Deal. That's not even a bill that's been voted on by Congress. And look at how much just the conversation about the Green New Deal has changed things. When you look at, socialism, it has killed 100 million people around the world since its inception 100 plus years ago. Most of those were women and children, and nothing limits choice more than socialism. If you look at, Russia in the 1980s, you had to basically take a lottery ticket to get a new refrigerator. It could take months to get that. Well, how are you going to feed your baby formula and take care of your family if you can't keep, basic things like milk and eggs cold? So that really limits choice. And then really going into the Green New Deal, since you mentioned
Right.
AOC, nothing will limit choice more for women than the Green New Deal, from the kind of car you're allowed to drive and pick up your kids after school, to the Ziploc bags put their snacks
Right.
in. All of those things involve petroleum,
Yes.
whether people like that or not, and price of gas, you
Right.
name it. It just really goes on and on. And the hypocrisy is what I think gets people the most. We know that AOC, when she was first running in 2008, she was taking Ubers and Lyfts, even though there was a subway stop 100 feet from her campaign's front
Right.
door. In fact, she was taking $32,000 worth of Ubers and Lyfts during her campaign, so it was pretty
Yeah.
significant. You can look at other companies that constantly preach, woke practices for the rest of us. I know you guys cover that a lot on America
Right.
UnCanceled. One of those offenders of the Green New Deal is Starbucks, who has lectured us on everything from equity to defunding the police. Well, Starbucks is one of the biggest offenders of the planet. They produce 8,000 of those paper Starbucks cups per minute. That's $4 billion cups per
Right.
year, filling our landfills. And the big lie that Starbucks seems to be telling women, who are predominantly their customers, are that these cups are recyclable. And in fact, they're only able to be recycled in about 4 cities in America because of that sheen, that plastic sheen
Yeah.
that goes around the paper cup.
Wow.
So the list really goes on
Yeah.
and on. Two of my other favorites, who are, big AOC hypocrites, right along with AOC herself, is Hollywood. Now, Hollywood, the scrap metal that is left behind by just one movie set equals about 205 tons of scrap metal just from one movie set, and that's an average size movie set. That's not even, a big blockbuster
Right.
action movie. And they also leave behind 72 tons of scrap food, and that's a lot of craft service tables. And that's from people lecturing us about not eating meat anymore, being careful about, not destroying the planet. That's a lot of trash left behind. The fashion industry also, Mercedes is also another big offender. AOC has graced the covers of, Vogue magazine and all these other
Right.
glossy magazines. But these fashion industry executives are also big polluters. About 92 tons of textile scraps fill landfills. And just while we were talking in the last 5 seconds, about 5 dump trucks were filled with textile waste.
That is, that's information I'm telling you a lot of people don't know. I do want to ask you this question because I thought this was a really important part of the book, which is how the defund the police movement versus the defending women, which is the real issue of choice. I got to tell you, just less than a mile away from my house, we've had multiple shootings in the area. Crime is just really taken over so many of these cities. Talk to us about why this is the real issue of choice.
Well, if you were watching the liberals during the midterms, you would think that abortion was the only issue of choice that women had to make a judgment on at the ballot box. But I really think this is the number one issue because it involves really your personal safety, your physical body, right? Which Democrats and feminists love to talk about your body, my body, my choice, when they're talking about abortion. But think about, there's nothing more personal than your own body when you're walking on the street, driving in your car, trying to come into your neighborhood. And what we saw statistically, I pulled a lot of statistics over the top 20 cities
Right.
in the post defund movement. And in places like Minneapolis, where it all started with the George Floyd incident, they didn't even defund the police. They just talked about it. If you remember, the mayor there a year later said, we've had a lot of sit-ins, we've heard you, but we're not actually going to change the budget. We're just going to, talk about it in theory and try to hold police more accountable. In the city of Minneapolis, in Ward 4, which is a high minority ward where George Floyd hailed from, sexual assault against women skyrocketed. It rose about 60%. Rape against women rose about 50%. It's continuing to rise. You also look at other cities that actually did defund their police, places like Austin, Texas, who stripped $150 million from their budget.
Wow.
Don't forget, Austin is a university town, University of
Yeah.
Texas. A lot of female, 52% of their enrollment is young women age 18. And so it's quite frightening. Murder rose in the city of Austin 200% in just the first year of the defund the police movement. So they really, no one again really has done sort of a post-mortem on
Right.
that and held those elected officials accountable.
Let's talk about Title IX, which you talk about being the crown jewel of the second wave of the feminist movement. You know, how I think this has been one of the bigger issues, especially when it comes with dealing with women's sports. And now all of a sudden they're saying, well, forget about women's sports. Like, you know, we're going to let the biological male play in the girls' sports. What was your finding there? What did you find that was helpful in terms of understanding this battle?
Well, you know, again, looking back at the feminist movement and their history through time, I looked back, 50 years at the start of the feminist movement, and their first victory at the United States Supreme Court was the Title IX decision. And that was their crown jewel. And that's what they took to other leaders and said, hey, we've really got something going here with this second wave of feminism. Gloria Steinem, Susan Faludi, all the other authors. And that was their real big claim to fame, that they were finding that girls didn't have access to the same, kind of sports equipment. We just saw the Super Bowl with Patrick Mahomes, being worked on at halftime. Girls didn't have those sort of access to those supplies and those positions that the boys in schools had. So that was really the purpose of Title IX, was to set up equality. And if you look at how the feminist movement has really, again, just become an enabler of the radical left Democrat Party today. They have completely forsaken those female young lady athletes that they once stood for and they once fought all the way to the Supreme Court for.
Let me ask you this. This story came out in the Wall Street Journal about teen girls experiencing record levels of sadness and suicide rate, saying that nearly 3 out of 5 high school girls in the U.S., they were having these feelings of persistent sadness or hopelessness in 2021. That's like 60% increase over the past decade. What do you think is causing that?
Well, as we talked about the lockdowns, it wasn't just women not going into their office places. This was teenage girls out of school, elementary girls out of school. And don't forget, the churches were also shuttered in places like California. You had Governor Gavin Newsom. That was one of the first things he did. And so you have to look at, all of the places in society where women and girls went to get support, right? Because we are very social creatures. Women like going to the workplace and collaborating with people. Teenage girls like going to school because they can, talk to their friends and catch up on gossip and be involved in sports. And then of that, you also had about 50% of Americans pre-pandemic said that they belonged to a church in America. And so all of those social structures and those social outlets for women were really completely dissolved, shut down, and shuttered at the hands of the Democrat Party. And that is really a shame. I think that, coupled with the feminist movement now being one of the chapters, I call it the big tech bullies and their feminist handmaidens. I mean, we see a lot in pulp culture in Hollywood talking about how, Republicans are really the handmaid's tale. No, it's actually the opposite. It's actually liberals today and women in the feminist movement today acting as enablers and handlers, basically, for big tech. Now, we know from the whistleblower that testified on Capitol Hill a year or two ago, Frances Haugen, she sort of delved into this, Mercedes, this issue you're bringing up, which is that Facebook and Instagram were actually, even during the pandemic, trying to make girls more depressed because that made them better consumers of the Facebook and Instagram products. And so that is something I think, again, that it happened at the hands of Democrats, happened at the hands of big tech, and happened at the hands of feminism. And, it's really a shame. And I think we've only really begun to see the tip of that iceberg.
Well, Jennifer Kerns, The Real War on Women. Where can people buy your book? This is a must read especially for the suburban moms out there who want to learn more about what's happening and what the Democrats are doing.
Yes, I have cancel cultured my book from tip to toe. We're not relying on Jeff Bezos at all. The only place you can get it is The Real War on women.com. And it ships just like it would out of Amazon, 2-day shipping. You'll have it in your hands by the week.
Excellent. Well, make sure y'all can support Jennifer Kerns. She's a wonderful patriot in this movement and making sure that we have the right facts, because always our viewers are saying, what are the facts we have to share with other folks? Well, this is a very good guidebook for this as well, playbook for this. So thank you, Jennifer Kerns, for joining me on the show.
Thank you so much.
And thank you all for watching. Remember, we have expanded to the podcast world, and you can listen to America Uncanceled with Matt and Mercedes Schlapp wherever you get your podcast. Also, get your tickets for CPAC March 1st through the 4th. Go to cpac.org/DC now.